Well, well, folks, it looks like Ruby Franke and Jody Hildebrand may be trying to make some plea deals because they have been sitting in jail without a bond hearing since August 30th. Um, Ruby's hearing is set for December 18th, and Jody's is set for December 27th. Not sure why they put them on different, well, I mean, they are different cases technically, but I'm wondering why Ruby's is first, if maybe they're going to try and pin all the blame on Jody for being the person who came up with this weird counselor program that was tearing families apart and abusing children, allegedly. By the way, I just spent the last 24 hours trying to get my channel back up because Eugenia Cooney, or somebody on her Eugeniac team, tried to get a harassment strike against my channel. The video's back up if you want to watch it. It's on my channel. She's a celebrity, you guys. Like, I can literally do commentary about her. This is so wild that they tried to do that. By the way, it wasn't even that bad. It wasn't even like harassment. It was like, girl, eat some stuff. Like, take care of yourself and stop sexualizing your eating disorder. I don't say too terrible of things, but okay. So anyway, let's get into the Ruby Franke stuff.
It's been quiet in terms of the court proceedings until now. Today, the Deputy Washington County Attorney put forth a request for a waiver hearing, which would be in the coming weeks for Franke and Hildebrand separately.
Okay, so we actually have some pretty big updates when it comes to the Ruby Franke and Jody Hildebrand case.
And there was a heads up on this like a week ago or so. I think it was Sherry Franke was kind of alluding to some big things were about to happen. So, hopefully this will just get wrapped up quickly. Because I don't think this family wants to be dragged through a long trial. Like, if they can do a plea deal, get their sentences, hopefully they will, get a reasonable amount of jail time, well, prison time, for what they've done to these poor kids, and be kept away from them, and kept away from other children that they could potentially do this to. I think that is a satisfactory solution at this point. I would hope for them to get like 10 to 15 years. That's what I would hope for.
They've both been set separate waiver hearings, which could determine whether or not they go for the plea bargain, which could mean that, there's not going to be a trial. They could plead guilty. However, the whole crux of this, as far as I'm aware, that if you do decide to go with a plea bargain, it can lower your sentence. That is just my basic knowledge of what is going on. But of course, if they decide not to take it, then it could, ultimately then go to trial, and it will be a very long and drawn out process.
Waiver hearing is a procedural hearing set by the court. It's more of a status conference where the court discusses with the defendant and the prosecutor and defense counsel whether or not the defendant wishes to set a preliminary hearing or potentially waive their right to have a preliminary hearing if there's some sort of plea offer.
The attorney does also go on to say that in her judgment,
it would be absolutely foolish for them not to take plea deals. Eve was discovered still bound, and Russell was discovered with the duct tape and skin bone deep lacerations on his wrists and ankles. It would be absolutely foolish for them to try and deny that they did this to these kids.
And the court could perhaps be trying to get this hearing out just so this case doesn't fall through the cracks, because of course we do know that there was a date set. I can't remember what type of hearing this was, but there was a date set, and it got pushed back because of, an abundance of new evidence.
The sense when something like this is scheduled that there have been the discussions and a plea bargain or a guilty plea could be looming.
Not necessarily. These are set as a matter of course. In reviewing the docket, my sort of take on it is that the prosecutor requests that this be set because it was continued without date previously. And I think their concern is if we don't set something, this case is going to fall through the cracks.
So here we have Jodi Hildebrandt's document, and it says it's set for December 27th, 2023 at 11 a.m. And then we have Ruby Franke's, who is a bit closer, December 18th, 2023 at 11 a.m. Now, these are proposed. This could shift, the dates could change, but this is the proposed dates and time. So if this goes ahead, then, Ruby Franke could be appearing again next Monday. Now, this could actually, like I already said, this could be massive. They could turn up, they could be offered a plea bargain, they could take the plea bargain, they could perhaps, be sentenced actually on that day, according to the stuff that I've read and according to what people are saying. They could very well be sentenced on that day. Now, my question is, and I don't know, and it's really hard to even speculate.
Just in time for Christmas, right, ladies? They've missed Thanksgiving, they missed Halloween. They've been sitting there in their striped jumpers since August 30th. You could wrap it up right now. If you think you're going to defeat this, you're out of your minds.
On this, Ruby and Jodi have never once believed that they are ever in the wrong. Would they choose to take it if they were offered a plea bargain? Would they take it? Would they say that they were guilty? They do say that if you take the plea offer, it can reduce your sentence, although not always guaranteed. So would they take it? Or would they still put their head in the sand and say that it's not true? I have an inkling that is probably what they'll do, because they think everyone else is living in distortion. They think everyone else is living in La La Land, and they are the only ones who have a purpose and was sent from above to, come and rule the world. And I know that may sound a bit silly, but this is quite literally what Jodi Hildebrandt used to believe. I do think that by this, if this didn't actually go to trial, I think obviously ultimately that is the best thing for the children and that is the best thing for the families, so that, the families can start building bridges and can start, forming again and trying to build a life. If they did plead guilty, that is an obvious one. So I'm really not sure. It's going to be very tense to discover and learn what she does. My law knowledge is fairly minimal, but from the small bits of, hearings and all sorts that I've ever sort of heard about, it can be it can either be a very long and drawn out process or a very short and snappy one. So we will see, and time will tell. Obviously, Jodi's is after Christmas, and the idea of her having to sit in jail over Christmas while she's sort of just like waiting for hers, makes me a little bit happy, I won't lie. Time will tell exactly what is going on there, but I do think that this is a really big update.
Advising him to stay away from his family and isolate himself from even his extended family, siblings, parents, and most specifically stay away from his kids and stay away from his wife, Ruby.
Also, just like to touch on something that I was supposed to be touching on in the last video, but I didn't quite get round to it, and it was a interview where we had Kevin Franke's attorney come on, and he was saying some really interesting things that I think a lot of us did realise, and it has now come to fruition, but...
Well, you have to wonder, are the police trying to get some dirt on Kevin too? Because Kevin was certainly involved. I mean, he was on all those live streams. He knew what was happening to the kids. And then he's like, oh, well, I guess I gotta do what Jody says and just abandon my family and leave them to her whims. Right? There's got to be some responsibility there too. And what about Pam, who was apparently a watcher, according to Jesse Hildebrandt?
Back before all of this happened, I remember specifically they were talking about this on the Reddit thread, because I've been a member of the 8 Passenger Snark Reddit thread for a very long time, and they were very quick on it. And there were often people that would come on and would say that they know the family, or that, you know, they are a member of Kevin Franke's work, or anything along those lines. So you'd have people that were kind of moles, and people were coming on and they were saying, Jody has moved into the house. Jody's moved into the house and Kevin Franke was kicked out. And for the longest time, it was kind of hard to believe it, because it kind of felt like a bit of a whirlwind of information, and it's really hard to obviously judge when people come out anonymously and say this kind of stuff on a snark forum. But this was before anyone realised that anything to this extent was going on, you know, when everyone was just talking about Mums of Truth and connections. And they said that, you know, basically Kevin Franke had moved out and Jody had moved in. And according to Russell Kester, who is Kevin Franke's attorney and who has been in quite a lot of press runs, he was invited onto Court TV to give some information about what is happening now since filing from divorce from Ruby Franke. And he said that, you know, he had to move out. Jody Hildebrandt was actually counselling one of their children. And to me, that
would have been Chad. There's a video of after Chad got back from this retreat, this camp that he was sent to, that like is like a gay conversion camp, and it tries to deal with youth problems, right? There was a video in which he took a phone call from Jody while Ruby was live streaming. So Chad was definitely the one that was getting counseled. It's no wonder he looks like a petrified little dog shaking his tail. He looks scared as fuck.
Massive. Well, I mean, Jodie's not winning any prizes for, you know, being professional at this point. But yeah, that's obviously a big no-go. You don't move into a house that you are currently helping, but obviously Ruby and Jodie's relationship has always been ultra strange, so it does kind of play into this idea that she did quite literally, you know, turf out the husband to move in with the wife, which a lot of people do say. But I do find it really interesting how we were kind of given this information second-handedly over a year ago, I think, and then, you know, Kevin's then confirming it, saying that Jodie was in fact, you know, being a therapist for not only the whole family, but for one of the children specifically.
Kevin and one of their other children, who's now an adult, were also seeking advice and help from Jody through Ruby, who was advising them on how to improve their marriage and how to get their family back together.
They also said that I did find interesting as well is that when Kevin was kind of forced out of the house, he went to live in an apartment, and one of their elder kids wanted to move in with him. And both Jody and Ruby...
That was also Chad. I've seen lots of videos on this at this point. Chad went to go live with him for a while.
Wouldn't allow it, and so then they then made the 19-year-old move in by himself, and it's because they needed Kevin to be completely isolated from just about everyone, including, you know, not having any of the kids living with him, which obviously I think is absolutely bonkers. This does also line up with what other people have said when they've come out and they've been victims of Jodi.
That when their oldest son, who is now 19, actually moved in with Kevin to begin with in a separate apartment from the marital home, and was advised by Jodi and by Ruby that he couldn't be there together with his dad. They had to isolate from one another.
It really is quite scary how, you know, you're told this information. I've already said this, but you're told this information on a Reddit thread way before anything really quite serious happens of what we know. Obviously, we didn't know this information back then. This new information comes out, and then you're then left going, oh, people were actually right, you know, because you're never quite sure whether or not to trust these anonymous sources. And not every anonymous source is necessarily in the wrong, which is something that I have come to learn. But I just think it's, like, obviously an absolutely terrible tragedy. It's a terrible pattern of events. And it is one that hopefully we are going to be seeing an end to on Monday. Obviously, I know a lot of people would love nothing more than to see Ruby Franke get years behind bars. But we're just going to have to find out about it. We have been waiting a very long time. And yeah, so the next court hearing should be scheduled on next Monday. Today is Monday the something. But of course, it might not be set, it might change, but we just don't know, and we're just going to have to wait and see. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for...
Today is Monday, December 11th. And the court hearing for Ruby is scheduled for December 18th. Okay, let's see what happens. Let's see if she makes a plea deal.